I'm gonna get through this. What's up, y'all? I hope y'all are having a beautiful day. And I'm sure you're gonna wonder why I'm in a different room. And that is because I'm in my brother's former bedroom, because I think it's like 11 o'clock at night. Everybody's asleep. This is my only chance to make this video. And so I figured, since I'm wide awake, I might as well do this for you guys and get it over with. So, if you can't already tell, I am going to be telling you some experience of my own anxiety and depression, and I really wanted to come on here and keep this video as real and as honest and personal and uncut as possible, because it's definitely a topic that needs to be more in conversations and not so much a taboo, and realize that it's more common than not. And I definitely want to put a disclaimer out there that I myself is not an expert in this topic, and I won't claim to be. I will just take away from my own personal experience and my own knowledge in these two areas of mental illness, and I just hope it'll provide a little insight of what exactly it is, and if it can help anybody else or relate to anyone else. That is my main goal. So, without further ado, let's do it. So, first of all, I want to kind of go into my knowledge of anxiety and depression and how I kind of became knowledgeable of it, because I definitely know in my family it was one of those situations where mental illness especially was a taboo subject. You know, my family didn't really believe in psychiatrists, therapists. It was more so you kind of kept those things behind closed doors, or, you know, talk to your family about. It was definitely not something you would just run to a stranger and speak to about. I personally have wanted to do it for years now, but just haven't. I have been scared to officially be diagnosed in these manners because I was afraid of it being real, but I simply just want to call it anxiety and depression. But aside from that, the first time I truly realized that I had anxiety was my freshman year of college. A lot of people are probably going to think this is silly, but it's real. It's what happened. And I was going through this bad friendship breakup, and it was one of those first real friendship breakups that I had. You know, there was so much involved. It was one of those that kind of like relationships, whether or not you want to break up, it's one of those things that is best for that time, for the two people. You know, had to have that space away from each other, or else it'd be a lot worse in the long run. And that is what was happening here. And being that I was living with my aunt at the time, and I was in a whole new city, I mean, it's like 45 minutes away, but still, being in a new neighborhood, city, around, you know, neighbors and people and community that had no idea who they were, and going to a college, first off, my first year, going to a school I knew nobody, because, you know, in high school, middle school, elementary school, you've known everybody for 10 years or so. And so to be around complete strangers all the time, I just felt alone at times. So to know that one of my best friends that I had since, you know, sophomore, junior year of high school, I was starting to really panic, and I didn't realize it because I was just like leaning on my bed, just kind of talking, watching TV, just relaxing for the night. And we were starting to have this little argument, I believe, and it was just one of those things where it was like, okay, look, I'm done. I think we should, step away from each other in this friendship and just give each other space. And although I knew it was the right thing, it terrified me. Because at the time I really only had like 2 or 3 friends going into college. And so to see and hear that one of them wanted to leave and not be friends anymore, at least, not for the time being, I started to freak out. And my heart was racing. I suddenly just couldn't breathe. I was getting this big knot in my throat and my chest. And I was just like, what's going on? Like, I seriously thought I was going to pass out and die. A lot of people may think that's dramatic, but it was what I was feeling at the time, and that's who I am. And so I was texting my other friend, and I was just like, I can't breathe. I think I'm gonna die. I just didn't know what to do. So I got up and I was kind of pacing a little bit, trying to calm down, but honestly, I don't think pacing would help. And I just was like, I don't know how to deal with this. How do I make it stop? Because in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta tell my friend, can we like just make up somehow? I don't think I can handle this. And instead, my other friend was like, you're having a panic attack. You just need to sit down, take deep breaths, count down from 10, count up to 10, whatever you need to do, but you just need to sit down, take those deep breaths, and realize that you were just fine. And so I did that, and it probably took me a good 10 minutes to truly calm down. And once I did, I was just thinking in my head, I was like, this whole situation is not as serious as it really was. Granted, it was a great friend. I eventually understood what was going on, that we needed to take this little friendship break from each other and give each other that space and to mature and all this good stuff. And it wasn't then when I realized that I struggled with anxiety, because going into college for the first time by myself and having these emotions, I realized, oh, okay, I was having these mildly, but on other days throughout the week, and I just had my first panic attack. It was almost like 5 anxieties put into one situation, and it was choking me. And at that moment, it became clear to me that I would struggle with this every day of my life. At this point in my college career, it became clear that I struggled with societal anxiety. And if you don't know what that is, it's more so that you have anxiety really anytime that you're in any social aspect, per se. Big crowds, going into situations unknowingly, not knowing what's going to happen, what's going on, who's going to be there, kind of thing. Classrooms can trigger that as well. Every first day of class, I freak out. It usually takes me 2 to 3 weeks of class periods to get used to people, to calm down, to be comfortable. Speeches were a big thing. It wasn't until I took speech course that really helped me with my anxiety, because that forced me to do these speeches in front of, 30 people. And granted, I freaked out, sweaty palms, couldn't breathe, almost panic attacks in front of the classroom. But I worked through it and had the encouragement of my professor and my classmates and the friends I made in that class. And I realized, it's not that bad, but I still struggle with it every day. It never gets easy going into a room of strangers or going into a gathering where you don't know anybody. Leading to the topic of depression, it was one of those things where anxiety was built up into depression. Now, if you don't already know the difference between the two, anxiety is more so not so much temporary, but a short period where, for example, you have a speech for class, or you're hosting like a social gathering or something to that effect socially, at least in my aspect. My anxiety, you freak out about this situation and you get all the, regular symptoms of anxiety. And as it's going on, you're internally freaking out and having all these thoughts run through your head. But as soon as the event or the presentation and so on is over, it's usually, over and done. You can breathe, you can go, whoo. It may last a few minutes after that and be like, get the jitters out, get the shakes out, get the nerves down, but it's only for a short period of time. Whereas when it comes to depression, it tends to have the same symptoms, but instead it lasts a lot longer. It turns to this feeling of, did I do that right? What ifs, I could have done this better. And it kind of puts you down, and it could go into, hours or days or weeks or months or years of you dreading of this one situation or one moment, and can just, bring you down anytime that it wants to. When it came to depression, I am not going to cry. I didn't realize what depression was until my mother died. I always had this personality that when it came to my anxiety, I thought, and I still do think, the worst of any situation. It can happen more often in some moments, and it can happen sporadically, honestly, depending on my mood for the most part. Some days I would just be, daydreaming or thinking, these evil and bad thoughts, and you can use your imagination. And most of them ended up in some kind of death, whether it's myself or those around me. And when it came to my mother, I never really thought seriously that she was going to die, but I always anticipated it, feared it, and always gave me anxiety thinking, when is it going to happen? The unknown was very anxious for me. And I remember my freshman year of high school, one friend I had, and we were talking about my mother, and at this point, she was only sick for like a year or less, and he said, I don't think your mother is gonna live more than 5 years. And of course, that was a little harsh to me, and I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna get better. She's gonna be fine in a couple years or so. She's not gonna be sick forever. And in 2015, I remember it was Friday the 13th, and I think it was a February or January, and I got a call from my aunt saying that my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And the scary thing was, the year before, and I even think it was a few months before that, I imagined and feared and thought this bad situation was that my mother would get cancer, because I thought that would be the worst thing ever, because in my mind, anybody who got cancer died. So when I got that call saying that my mother had cancer, stage 4, I instantly thought, it's over. Like I thought this, and we went to every treatment that we could, every appointment that we could, and sat there through her chemos. I couldn't ever go to her radiations because, if I remember correctly, they never had room on the ambulance, or it just always never worked out, or was too far where the appointment was, so I was never able to go to those. But I made it to every one of her chemo treatments and appointments because I wanted to be a part of it and know what was going on, obviously. I believe it was, 6 months later, she was fine. I don't think they ever said it was cured, but it was, treated or downsized enough to a healthy point, I guess. I don't know. And so, that was good news. We're like, okay, great, my mother beat cancer. And it was throat cancer, to be exact. It was all hunky-dory, and I was like, well, if she can beat cancer, she can do anything. It wasn't until a year later that there was like a period that she was doing so amazing. She was able to eat, lift her forks, and she was talking so good, and she actually had sharp memory and, doing these great things. And the next thing you know, she was declining, getting weak, just tired all the time, not being able to eat, and eventually having to just drink water. And at that point, she couldn't drink water, and she had to take some certain medicine because her throat was starting to hurt. And at this point, I knew that when it came to people dying, being that I was a certified nursing assistant, a couple years prior, I knew the symptoms of a dying patient, and I knew her time was coming. And what was really bad is hospice. I think earlier that year was like, your mother has a couple months, and maybe it was the year before, and they told us, she doesn't have that long. And so, we were prepared, visiting her and making sure we had that time spent. And she then like bounced back and was fine. And you know, she started to decline, as I was saying, and then the hospice was like, you know, I mean, of course, my grandmother told us, you know, they said she had a month left. And my goofy self was like, we've heard this before. I think she'll be fine. But part of me knew this was probably it. I need to see her every single day that I could. But there was probably 3 times that we saw her in that month. And the last time was the day before. I'm gonna get through this. And the day before, I walked into that room and I instantly started crying. Knowing my mother, she looked at me as I walked in and smiled. And she said, "Hey, baby." And I kept a strong face. And she asked for a drink. And at this point, her little special drink, she couldn't really take that either. She was coughing, and it was hard to swallow. And so, my whole 30 minutes that I sat there, I knew that this was it. And I cried probably the last 2 minutes I sat there. You know, at one point I went to the bathroom to like collect myself because I'm like, I can't let her see me cry, but that's my mother. And at one point, you know, I always tried to mention my brother and, you know, he loves you and all this stuff because he was at work this day and so he couldn't come with me. And the funny thing was, I wasn't planning at all to see her. It was just one of those things where I had nothing to do, so I was like, you know, I'm gonna go see her. And as I was driving there, I was like, you know, I'm gonna take some pictures of some of the, you know, landmarks or whatever. And in my head, I kind of thought it was weird because I went on the interstate and it was backed up or something, and my map rerouted me to like a back way that I've never been before. And so I was like, you know, I'm gonna take a picture of the water tower that says the city on it or the town on it, and I'm gonna just take these pretty pictures. And part of me thought it was weird. I was like, you know, why am I taking these pictures? But whatever, I'm a picture person. And so when I got there and saw how much of a bad shape she was, and I instantly just took a picture of everything in the room. I took a picture of her closet, her bedstand, you know, the other side of her room, her window, the things in her window. I took a picture of me and her holding hands. And I remember she like squeezed my hand and she looked at me and smiled and she said, "I love you." Because I think at that moment we both knew. And I think it was her way to kind of tell me it's gonna be okay. And to tell my brother she loves him. And I think at that moment, I texted my brother and I said, Mom said she loves you and she's smiling. And I didn't want to let him down, so I don't think I really told him exactly how she was feeling. But I remember looking at the clock and I think it was like 1:30, and part of me just couldn't sit there for any longer. So I gave her a kiss on the cheek and I told her I loved her and I would see her later. I either said that or like sweet dreams or bye mama. And she was like, bye baby. And when I turned around, she was asleep. And I instantly cried walking down that room. Because I just knew that was the last time I was going to see her. So, the next morning, we get the call that my mother did in fact pass away early that morning. And that was honestly one of the most lowest points in my life. My mother, I can honestly say, was my best friend. One of the greatest people and mothers I could have ever asked for. And I took a week off school to obviously grieve, cope, plan the funeral, and I went back to school that next Monday, and my professors were kind of surprised and shocked, and I remember my English professor was, Anna, you can take another week, take as much time as you need, because he related to this on a personal level, and my father and my stepmother, didn't allow me to stay home because they knew the state I was in, and it just, to them, wasn't healthy for me to just lay around all day. Granted, I never really did. I think every morning I still had to get up and go help my father with his business, so I never really got the chance, I don't think, to properly grieve, in my opinion. I still had to go on every day, acting like it was normal, and I don't blame them at all for, I guess maybe trying to put me in this groove, distract me, but it's not the way I do things. I like to grieve and take that time to myself, and I never, even to this day, I don't think, have properly done that. And so I battled with depression alone, in the showers by myself, sitting on the floor of the tub as water ran on my face. Drives to school, I cried in the car and sat in the car for 15-20 minutes before class started crying. Or even on the way home, it would just hit me. And in most cases, I would stay up, just stare at my ceiling, just wonder why and what if, and just felt empty. And I never realized what depression looked like until the one thing that made me happy was gone. I'm not gonna say she was the only person that made me happy. Clearly, a lot of people make me happy, but when your own mother is taken away from you way too soon. You don't know how to deal with that. And I remember on the month anniversary, I was in my karate class. You know, I was acting normal, everything was fine, and it came to a point we had to do a routine, where we pretty much boxed the other person. I don't remember the term. And all of a sudden, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I instantly felt this overwhelming sadness. And I kind of collapsed on the floor. And my sensei, my karate instructor, was like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I can't do it. It's the 1 month anniversary and I just cannot do it." And she was like, "Go home, do what you have to do." I also want to note that in this month, I continued to have anxiety and panic attacks going from class to the bathrooms, texting my brother and calling him freaking out after my mom passed. And I just kind of wanted to put that little note in there too. Okay. And to this day, I continue to struggle with depression. I tend to get in these moods, 2 to 3 days at a time, where I kind of stop talking, to people. I don't interact. I avoid people. I just get in these moods where I don't feel like doing anything. And they can happen suddenly. If I'm honest, this past week has been one of those situations, and I believe it was the holidays, because those tend to be rough for me. And it just hit me on Monday that something just didn't feel right, and all week I've been sad. I just have not been able to feel happy, whereas last week I was the most bubbliest I've been in a while. I was super happy, excited about everything that was going on in my life, and this week I just feel like nothing's going right. And luckily I still have that support system that tried to pick me up and make me laugh no matter what, and support me and check on me and love me and are there for me, and I'm so lucky to have them around. Although I will continue to struggle with these societal anxieties or generalized anxieties or depression, and how that's affected my past, my memories, and the trauma, and let alone losing a parent. I also, a year later, lost my first pet that was dear to me, and that honestly brought me down too, because he was brought into my life when my mom first got diagnosed with cancer shortly after, and to lose him so soon, that broke my heart as well, and I still struggle with that to this day. I mean, animals are like family, and although I kind of had a crying fest there for a minute, that's real, that's raw, that's what this anxiety and depression bring out. It's sad, it's true, it's real, and that's mental health for you as well. It can creep up on you, it can be your best friend, it can be your worst enemy, and it's just one of those things that need to be talked about more. And I do apologize if you've made it this far for the long video, but I wanted to be as real as possible and be honest and just tell you guys what I've gone through and do go through on a daily basis. And I love you, and I want to thank y'all for giving me this chance and opportunity to speak this out to the public forum and almost have a therapy session with myself. And if you know anybody that's struggling, or if you are struggling yourselves, feel free to come to me. Feel free to comment down below how you relate, or if you have any techniques for these situations. I know I've tried a few apps here and there for my anxiety, and obviously that comes with it. I just kind of lose sight of it, let it go. Don't have the motivation to do it. I just deal with it when it comes and goes. But tomorrow is another day. It's going to be a great weekend, and I only wish and hope for the best in every day. And when those moments come, I deal with them, and we can only see where the future holds. So, I love you guys, and I will definitely see y'all next week. Bye.